How's it, everyone? Welcome to the Version 8 Marketing Podcast. This podcast is for those interested in learning more about modern marketing strategies that can help you attract more customers. And today we have Hercules Smit in the office/studio with us. And Hercules, welcome to the podcast, man.
Awesome. Feeling good. This is like such an awesome opportunity. These talks, these podcasts that you've been doing have been really interesting. Less preach, more conversation, which I'm loving. And awesome. Excited to get to talk about brand because the topic is sort of neglected.
100%. So from our side, for those of you listening, today we're going to be talking about brand building, brand strategy. Hercules and his wife is the founder of Designer. She's still involved with Designer, right?
Yes, yeah. She's not directly involved with day-to-day execution, but
still plays a role.
Yes, still plays a role.
So, we met back in 2013. That's when we first got introduced to you and your wife when, one of the leading sport retailers in sport nutrition bought out my first internet business.
Yeah.
Back in 2013. That's when I got to know you, and we've been acquainted for, 7 years now?
Yeah, it's actually insane how time flies.
Crazy.
But that was actually also quite an exciting time because we actually started booming at that same period in time, and it was just exciting. The same time as you.
Yeah, so from our side, that's when we met. We've been acquainted for 7 years, and for anybody that's worked with you and your wife and has done work with Designer will definitely, second that you guys are amazing at what you do. And that is the main reason why, obviously, I wanted to have this conversation with you, because obviously we're a marketing agency, more so focused on the paid media and strategy side. But then there's also this whole other realm of brand strategy, brand creative, branding itself, that plays a crucial role in attracting customers and converting people in actual paying customers, right? So with that said, that's the main reason why Herc is here today for those listening, and he's going to share some thoughts on brand strategy, and I hope that we're going to add some value to those interested. I'm excited to get started.
Yeah. I think just to sort of cover a bit more of where we come from, or myself more specifically, I actually wanted, originally I was set to do film, and I was a fanatic, or still am fanatic on cinematography, and I love the way films get shot. I love the strategy that goes behind it.
I'm going to ask a stupid question. Cinematography, exactly. Explain that to me exactly. Sorry, I sound stupid, but I'd rather ask so I know exactly what it is. Because
you've just made my day. That's it's awesome. Cinematography in film specifically, and I probably don't even know the full depth of what it goes into, but what gets me excited is how does a director and their full team of producers of a film, whether it's a show or feature film, get what they want in their heads onto screen. So it's got to do with film angles. I always refer to, when I speak about this topic, I always refer to a horror film with Harrison Ford I think it's back in the 1990s.
Air Force One? No.
It was What
That's
Lies
like the
Beneath.
first Harrison Ford movie I've seen in my life, because I was old enough to know who Harrison Ford is.
No, he was in quite a spooky film called What Lies Beneath.
Yes.
And it was just when I was still not really knowing what I was meant to do. And I just caught a behind-the-scenes feature where they showed the exact house that the entire film pretty much plays off in. And they would shoot the house at daytime, in the middle of the day, exact same angle, and you'd get a result, and they'd show you the result. And then they duplicate that exact shot, but they put it on a downward, upward 45-degree angle, and they do the exact same shot. And the way that house turned into something that you never want to go to.
Oh, really?
Was amazing.
Perception. It's almost like you changing people's perspective of, what the house actually is just by changing the angles.
Yes. And in the end, funnily enough, I got into pretty much exactly
Yeah.
the same thing.
Well, that's kind of what marketing
So-
is in essence. Like it's working with people's perceptions and you know, it's like that's exactly what it is. It's
Yeah.
the psychology, tapping into the psychology and portraying something, you know, articulating obviously what you want to articulate and then you tapping into those perceptions. So from our side, yeah, you were mentioning where you guys started, where you're from, and
Yeah.
how you got into brand and strategy.
So in those days, obviously, film wasn't really a aspiring route to choose as a career. Films weren't really shot in South Africa at that stage, and any education courses didn't really offer anything of real value. So the thought pattern I had was, and I was sort of instructed, I had the opportunity to go study, you know, on my dad's bill. But it was a condition of you go study. So
Yeah.
choose whatever you want to choose and do it. Else, if you come back 2 years later, you're on your own. So it was sort of a pressure choice. And I decided to do graphic design as a degree.
Okay.
And then I would specialize in animation and 3D modeling. And that was going to be my full route
Yes.
to get into film. But along the way, I fell in love with advertising, and I fell in love with the psychology aspect of it. So when you're trying to tell a story, how to do it, who you're talking to, all of that psychology aspect that came with advertising. Even though, albeit on my side, it was more on a design side of things and less on a marketing or strategy side.
Yes.
But through the years, working from agency to agency, I got headhunted once or twice to shift, which was great for my ego, helped with the paycheck, and eventually I just sort of got tired of the studio vibe and wasn't really taking to the big agency mindset. And yeah, before I knew it, without even thinking about it in the morning, I resigned by the afternoon, and that's where Designer was created. And funny enough, my wife also resigned from her job. I think 5 months earlier. So
Yeah.
it was big pressure, very quickly, and we had to learn to swim very quickly.
And the very deep end, yeah.
Yeah, and as a designer, you learn how hectic it is to try and execute work as well as manage a business, budgets, salaries, and all of that goes with being an entrepreneur.
100%.
So yeah, so that's pretty much where I came from. 7 to 9 years later, boom,
Yeah.
yeah.
Look, I mean, from our side, we've worked with you guys in the past, and I mean, like I said before, like anybody that's worked with you and your wife knows that you guys are doing an exceptional job at what you do. And again, that's why you're here today. So from our side, you know, branding, obviously we want to add as much value to everybody listening as much as possible. So if we had to dig into branding and strategy, like you would imagine a logo. Like if I remember back in the day when someone said, hey, I think you actually sat with me the day we were in the office. And you know, we got to meet each other, and there was a discussion on, we need to improve your brand of Fitness 101. And I was like, what do you mean, my logo? And
I actually remember that very clearly. It was just a case of I said the same thing that I said to the other client that you were referring to earlier, that we actually need to take a step back, because you can't fix something if it's not based on a good foundation.
Hundreds.
And that's where that came from. And then it's a big problem with a lot of...
And you know what the problem is? A lot of small business owners, I remember it myself, you're quite romantic and sentimental about what you've created yourself. But a lot of times that doesn't necessarily articulate exactly what the business, what you're trying to make the business stand for. So I remember then we were like the sporty health and fitness website, kind of like a competitor for men's health that was like all about sports nutrition and, you know, active lifestyle. But the logo was weak and scrawny, and like I remember you said, without obviously trying to offend me, you know, in the most passive way, in the most passive way possible, you're like, well, your logo is a little bit thin. If you didn't think about sport, bold, you know, and you kind of like explained it to me, and then I actually realized, wow, you know, branding is more than just a logo, right?
Well, to put, funny enough, the logo that we carried on and developed for you is so steadfast imprinted in my mind.
Yeah. So
your previous logo.
Sorry to interrupt you. I have the previous logo, the first logo, and I have the one that you designed, and we're going to put that up somewhere just so that people can see it before and after, like bring back some memory lanes.
I actually can't remember how it used to look, so I think
remember
that's a
clearly
good
it was
thing.
horrible.
So just to touch on the logo, like that's the first thing that most clients refer to when you say, look, we got to fix your brand because this isn't going to work. Then they're like, yeah, but we've already done our logo. And then I'm like, whoa, okay, wait. Add the brakes, because your logo is just a brand representation of who you are. It's the exact same as your signature when you're signing a check. It isn't the core foundation of your brand. It only holds the value that your company creates as a perception out in the market. I always refer to it as my own term, as a brand identifier. That's all it is. And slowly but surely you start attaching values to that logo. And then that logo becomes so synonymous with what you offer that it can just become a tick, and you can remove the Nike.
Yeah.
And it still holds that same value. But I mean, that's 30 years in the making. So it's not something that you just do overnight. So I also got a lot of clients that end up saying, as we design our logo, can you do an icon for us? And I want to use the icon, yeah. Then I'm like, okay, wait, again, break, because you can't attach, you need to decide what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And if you want an icon, you first have to build your value proposition into your brand or your brand identifier.
Yes.
And then you got to start transferring that to your icon.
Yeah.
So like I remember with Fitness 101, we did do an icon that formed part of your main logo. I think it was F101 was the icon.
Yes.
So just as an example, if it popped up on the cast here, the F101 would have slowly absorbed the brand values that your company or Fitness 101 was delivering to market. And as soon as that you hit that peak where people are actually buying into your brand, which would obviously be attached to a lot of success on your side.
And hard work.
And hard work.
And audience. Like it's all relevant to audience, right? How many
Yes.
people actually know about the brand? Because they have to identify with what you're doing.
And it's not just about memory. It's not just understanding that F101 is attached to Fitness 101.
Yeah.
And that's what it stands for. It's actually buying into that. I mean, you see a Nike tick and you think Nike. It's not just, it's a tick mark. Oh, yeah, okay, great. It's you see it straight away. And I mean, every person who talks about brand probably refers to Nike at some point in the talk, where we're trying to emphasize what they did right for 30 years.
And Apple.
Yeah, well, Apple is actually probably taking over that role a little bit in all the talks about brand, but
and Coca-Cola. Those are the three I always think about.
Yeah. So just to sort of keep on track, I wanted to sort of just touch on that the brand identifier. So it doesn't represent who you are. It is an identifier of who you are. But every touch point of your company is your brand. So to all the viewers out there, if your receptionist answers the phone and she has just had a bad day, or he, I don't want to be sexist in any way, just had a bad day or was in a car accident, answers the phone, gives a bit of a bad impression, that's brand.
Hundreds.
You've just then done damage to brand.
A classic example of that, sorry to interrupt you, is Takealot. Like, as much as I see the blue logo everywhere, I've come to kind of like feel comfortable with them as a business. Every time I want to return something, I know there's a guy picking up the phone, going, "Cool, we'll come pick it up." It's now that was back in the day. Now it's as convenient as just logging it on the app. Someone comes. Like I just feel comfortable doing shopping with them, and I think they've created this sense of comfortability, convenience, and comfortability. Like it's just sitting back and going, "Oh, I don't like this anymore. I want to exchange it, or this broke." I just feel comfortable making decisions on Takealot. Like it's just so easy to obviously browse, but that's all brand. It's not just the logo and the colors and the ads that they've done. They've actually led through to actual experience.
It's actually such a good and perfect example because they find themselves pretty much in the social realm. There is no need for a intensive executional brand. So you're not seeing billboards out there going wild, and it's Takealot, and it's their environment is online. But it's such a perfect example of how different endpoints, the way you get treated when you phone Takealot, the fact that you get your product refunded or you get credit on online store or cash back. I'm not even sure. I've never asked for a full refund before. I don't know if they do that or if they actually give you credit.
So let me give you an example. Sorry, we ordered a charger last year from Takealot, and an Apple charger for one of the Macs. We ordered it. It came. It didn't work. Exchanged it for another one. It worked for a week. Broke. Exchanged it for another one. I can't remember what happened. I think it was a generic charger, so it wasn't necessarily maybe as strong as we would want it to be to cope with the plug, or I don't know what happened, but it burnt out. Like, it just literally stopped working, and it was like super, super hot every time you had to plug it in.
Yeah.
So I just logged a complaint on not a complaint, that's the wrong word, but I just logged it on Takealot, and I said, look guys, we're having issues with this. This is the second one in a row. I don't know if it's our devices or whether it is the wrong order. You just need to give me guidance where to from here.
Yeah.
And they actually said, no, we'll come pick it up. They gave me a full refund. Like, no questions asked.
Yeah. Well, that's part of building a brand, because your perception changes and your decision to use Takealot again gets influenced. And that, by definition, is brand. Like I said, I just touched on the receptionist answering the phone. Your sales rep. If your sales rep doesn't deliver the values, look, some companies are more formal. Maybe your sales rep walks into an office to see a client, and they maybe you do agriculture and you're in shorts, and you, regardless of which environment you find yourself, if your values that you are delivering as a sales rep and you are a specific list, and you're not delivering that in a meeting with a client, then you damaging your brand, because you're influencing the choice for that client or potential client to use you again.
Yeah.
And that is brand. And then that extent, then we move over to the actual physical appearance of brand, which is the common thought of definition of brand for most clients. So when you say brand, they're thinking of your billboard, your letterhead, and your logo. But it's so much deeper than that. Yeah. And when you start talking strategy, then we sort of pull back, and that's what I was saying. We have to take a step back and fix that foundation. Yeah. So that when we start building all these blocks on top of your brand, so that you're fixing the way your receptionist is answering, how your sales rep is treating, how your billboard looks, and redesigning your logo. Yeah. Then you've got a good foundation to work from. That's what I was referring to.
No, 100%. And I think there's numerous benefits to, looking at your overall brand, not just the visual side, but also experience, right? So there's numerous benefits. But from a visual perspective, you'll know more than me. Like, I just know that people associate, if we, for example, Fitness 101 at that time, and now version 8, we white and teal green. So it's about repeating those colors consistently on social media so that people can become like more, acquainted. It's brand repetition, the frequency, people start relating with the colors and what it is. So if they see a specific post, they know it's from us, whatever it is. So my question is, like, what kind of benefits as a whole, like, I know there's numerous benefits, but like, are there like 5 top benefits of focusing on your brand? Specifically around the visual side, like, we know that brand experience is probably a completely different topic, of the sales lady and your secretary and all that kind of stuff. But from a visual perspective, focusing on your brand and getting your logo right and that foundation right, and then your colors right, your CI and your website and all, like, can you list like top 5 benefits for the people listening of what it can actually do for their business and their bottom line? Yeah,
I actually reduce it down to 3. Like you said, there's numerous. Most blogs or most talks will probably refer to the 5, but I actually reverted down to 3, and it's trust, connection, and motivation. So I position it into those 3 is because trust is something that you have to communicate outward, and it mainly deals with your clientele. Connection is how do you get what you're trying to say and who you're trying to be, and make that relatable to the client or customer. And then motivation is how you talk inward. because talking inward is just as important for brand than talking outward. Everyone's focused on talking
When you say
outward.
talking inward, you mean like internally in the company with your
Internally
staff
in
and
the
employees and all that
company.
kind of stuff?
So there again, just to refer to what most of our clients make a mistake in doing is thinking it's just your vision and your mission statement.
Yeah.
And that's where your internal talking stops. Or the creation of your values for your company, and then boom, there it is, and then you revisit it on an annual basis. That's not working on your internal brand. Working on your internal brand involves HR. How do you motivate staff? How do you reward staff? How do you put your staff on the same level of excitement in your company?
I'm hearing you say almost like culture as well.
Yes. So just to sort of keep that point, but just to refrain off that slightly. So we always work with a brand experience, customer experience, and employee experience.
Okay.
So those are it's almost like the branding funnel, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
And
I like that. Can I coin it?
You can coin it.
Nobody else coined it?
Well, probably not.
I like it.
I think maybe I've even sort of stolen that somewhere, but as far as I know, I started utilizing it in meetings. But definitely the structure of the funnel is something that the industry actually uses quite a lot. So your brand experience is the interaction that anyone that hasn't dealt with your brand before, hasn't made a purchase, hasn't made use of your service. So it's the perception you creating to potential clients out there that haven't dealt with you. Customer experience is when you're talking, because remember, you're talking and you're saying a specific thing and you're talking to a specific person. Once that client or potential client becomes a customer and has now bought from you and has now bought into a deal that you deliver a service or a value like someone would buy into Apple, you're going to start talking to them differently, right? It's like it's if you say hi to someone on the street, it's different to when you've invited them into your home.
For a second, I didn't understand what you were saying, but you explained it like if you well acquainted with someone, your relationship changes.
Yes, and the way you speak to them changes. So now you're not saying, please trust us, because this is what we have to offer. You're now saying, thank you for trusting us, and this is what you can benefit from us, or here's a good deal because you've bought from us. Discovery is giving you miles, and F&B gives you e-bucks. It's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Once you've actually stepped over that line, so that then deals with the customer experience. But one thing that clients, or our clients specifically, forget about sometimes is the employee experience.
Yeah.
So the employee experience is very important because you need to drive your company to perform, and a lot of employers don't involve their employees in their strategy or in their successes. You know, us as an agency, if we get an accolade or if we get nominated for something or we get an achievement of some sort, and I just refrain from telling anyone, and it's just on a shelf there in the studio with no real reasoning behind it, then none of your employees are getting excited. If you're a major brand and you're putting a billboard up, tell your employees about it. Tell them, or if you're putting a social post out, get your guys to share it. Get them involved. Motivate them. Reward them to actually promote what you're putting out there as employee, because that creates enthusiasm and it creates motivation. So that's that left angle of those three benefits.
And a company that pops into my mind is, I don't know if you know the book called Delivering Happiness by Zappos. So do you know?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Yeah.
No.
So there's a company in overseas, and anybody can Google this. It's called Zappos. They've been bought out by Amazon, and they are known as a company that's got intoxicating culture in a good way. And I can't remember their main slogan now. I think it's Delivering Happiness or something like that. But the book was all about their culture and how their culture actually helped them grow as a brand. So you can see how the business is internally healthy, and that led people to almost want to share part of that. The customers on the outside was like, but we want to be part of that culture because it's so cool. And we see how you treat your employees, and that kind of like created their brand for them, Delivering Happiness. So they came up with all these cool, they were the first, I think, the online stores to say, hey, you can order 10 shoes and then send 9 back, and then,
Yeah.
10 different sizes or whatever it is, because they wanted to make sure that that same internal, I would say, value that they were giving to their internal employees and staff, they were trying to replicate that on the outside and going, cool, what kind of value can we provide to you? So we're going to make it convenient for you to try and fit on shoes, because we know it's a pain point. So you can order 10 of them, send 9 back if you want, keep whatever it is. Like, they've just focused on convenience more than anything.
Can I actually extend your point there? What people don't really realize is that, if I followed some of the other podcasts with Gilbert, Carl, and Charles, a lot of points came out on what an effort it is to actually gain a lead or a client or a purchase.
Hundreds.
Right? So you have to fight to get someone to even talk about your business.
It's a battle, yeah.
Yeah, right? Having your employees talk about your business is free. Right? And that's crucial at such a point level, because if you've got a toxic environment, what are your employees saying to other people around a braai on Saturday? If I take one of my clients that deals in the automotive industry, they sell auto batteries. I've used this actually in a meeting with them before, and I say, if I work for your company, and I'm standing around a fire on the weekend, and all I've had is a toxic experience at that company, and someone says, "Geez, I need to take my BM in because my battery's acting up, and I know that I can't really take my BMW anywhere. It needs to be done by a proper company and stuff." Then I'm going to say, you're probably going to need to do that because X, Y, Z, but I wouldn't go close to this company because this is how it is. My boss is like this, that. And the whole brand delivery that that employee is doing, or myself is doing, is negative. And I'm actually damaging the brand. Not even that I'm consciously wanting to do it.
And people don't think about that.
Yeah, it's not like I've now got a knife out for the company I work for. It's just I'm delivering my experience at work to the people that are around me. And that's free. It's free, so it can be a good tool, but it can be a bad tool. So when we're talking about that motivation core benefit, it's not really, it's talking inward. And it's how you're building your brand through values, mission statements, because people, that's why those elements inside a business, which are, it's a bit more on the formal side of marketing and not on the executional side. But those are the core reasonings that you talk inward, so that you can create the same excitement with your employees than what you're trying to do with your with the potential clients.
100%. No, I completely get that. I want to take a step back quickly. You mentioned, the 3 top benefits, right? I would quickly want to touch on that. So we talked about trust, connection, and motivation.
Yeah.
So layman's terms, can we break that down? Let's start with trust.
So let's actually start on the left, which is the motivation, which we just tackled in detail, right? So that's talking inward. That's actually motivating yourself, your business, and your staff to do what they need to do so that you can grow, right? So
I want to touch something on that, is that you mentioned the mission statement, right?
Yeah.
And while we're talking about that internal communication and motivation, is that you have your internal vision for the business, and that your employees obviously buy into. Now, one thing I've realized is that a lot of companies make this completely abstract and subjective. It's like, we want to be the number one retailer
in the world.
We want to be the world, and we want to strive for global dominance and offer extreme, awesome customer experience. Like, none of that really means anything. Like, there's no way that you can tangibly go and say, cool, this is actually, I can understand what you're trying to achieve, because it's all, what is the word? Up to
fluff.
It's
we
fluff.
call it fluff, yeah.
But it's fluff. I can't think of the English word now because I'm Afrikaans. I'm trying to think of the word. It's a word. It's like, it's all up to themselves. Like, it's up to their own interpretation. Interpretation is the word I was looking for. So that vision statement, if it's very abstract and subjective, it's literally up to their own interpretation of what that actually means. And that's why it's important to make sure that it's tangible and makes actual sense for everybody in the business. And everybody needs to understand what you actually mean when you're saying that, and what are the next steps in order to get there as well.
It's the exact same thing on the business side of it. So if I'm a self-taught entrepreneur, so I probably don't know the ins and outs of every single detail of running a business. I had to learn that myself. But very qualified business leaders will know that they can't put abstract goals for their business because they need to be able to show these returns at the end of whatever period. And if those goals are completely abstract or impossible to reach, you're going to look like you've got egg on your face.
And the investors are going to,
So it's the exact same theory with your employees. They're going to just treat you or your values or your mission statement or anything like that. They're going to treat like a bad social ad that pops by. You're just going to keep scrolling, and you're going to wait for your paycheck at the end of the month because nothing's exciting you, nothing's driving you, and you're not excited. So your performance is going to reflect that like a mirror image. So that sort of deals with that inward talk, which is your motivation. So I'm going to skip through because I want to come back to the connection. So trust is what you want to do, because trust is the biggest thing out there. So whether we're talking building a brand value or ethos of trust, Apple's done that really well because people are willing to pay what Apple charges because they trust them.
Hundreds.
And
I actually thought about it the other day. Like the new AirPods Pros are coming out, right? I think there's like obviously shortage because of what's happening in China, and it's obviously quite sad to see what is happening. But like I was in the Apple store and I was like, I just out of interest asked what the costs are. And it was like $7,000. What they're going to launch it for, or seven or? And I was like, my goodness, that's expensive. And then I thought about it. Like, there's a lot of people that's paying that without asking even. They're not even trying to justify the price because it's Apple.
Yeah, and a lot of it's ego, which is I won't be ashamed to admit that it's also partly ego on my side. I mean, I'm a creative, and creatives are synonymous with Apple.
Yeah.
I only use Macs.
True.
I've got a MacBook. I have an iPhone. So it is definitely ego. But with ego, trust is attached to it because, yes, you got an ego. Yes, you want the product that sort of puts a designer status out there. But you're not going to do it if you know you're not going to get quality. And that's the big balance that they've got.
And Apple got it right to make you feel like that because it's premium products, and you have that ego because you want to show that you can afford premium products.
Yeah, it's not a crappy product.
Yeah,
that is just overpriced. It's a
decent product,
really quality product that's overpriced. So it's like you know, obviously any Android person would argue that, and that would be a fun debate for about an hour. But anyway, to sort of get to the exact point, there is trust is the core almost of every social lead generation, return on investment that you guys have got online. Any goal that we have with our brand strategy is all based on trust. You're not going to put out R1 for a product or a service if you do not trust that you're going to get your money's worth.
True.
And that is the basis of any business. I think if you had to strip away all the eye candy and you bring it down to what the director wants to know. He wants to know, am I going to make a cent? That is going to be what it's based on, is will someone spend R1 if they do not trust us? The potential client is going to say the same thing to himself, but in the reverse.
Yeah.
So he's going to say, I'm not going to spend R1 if I'm not getting what I'm paying for.
Yeah.
So
so how do brands like smaller to medium-sized businesses now, you know, you talk about trust, connection, and motivation. We're going to get to the connection part. Motivation we've touched on, but trust, like how do you go about doing that? Like what do you do as a small business when it comes to your brand? Like how do you go about some practical tips that you can think of?
Is the biggest one is consistency. So consistency obviously travels along all the touch points. So consistency on how you treat your clients, how you answer the phone, all of those type of aspects. But when your visual representation, the tick, the Nike tick, the Apple logo, the brand identifier that holds the values, if that's not treated with absolute consistency, you're not giving a platform for a consumer to transfer those values to it. So if you are shouting quality and you're shouting brilliance and you're shouting awesomeness, but your logo looks like this here and like that there, and it's not even here, or your website, one page, your menu's here, and then all of a sudden your website's menu's on the sidebar, and and there's not consistency. The perception that you start creating is that you don't even have your own house in order.
Hundreds.
And if you don't have your own house in order, then technically, how do you proclaim to give quality, or how do you proclaim? So then you start affecting the trust that the consumer has. So consistency is probably the biggest part of it.
And the first thing I can think of is that you guys are completely anal when it comes to the positioning, the color. You know, what is this? Is this the actual color code? And it's like maybe slightly off. I remember, you know, back in the day, you would go like, I think the color is wrong here, Yandre, or this or that, or the positioning. And I'm like, what doesn't really matter? But now, obviously, you know, there's reason behind it. I mean, maybe you want to quickly just touch on that as well, because I want to know why you guys are so anal about that.
Well, designers are normally anal, especially because when it comes to their own work. So don't diss our work and don't give us grief about it.
Yeah.
But all jokes aside, that it's there. It's that exact reason to ensure the consistency is there, so that all the work that we're doing, and I mean, a lot of people will look at this and feel, oh, that's talking a bunch of crap. It's not that bad if your logo is the wrong color when it comes out, but it starts affecting a brand. Look,
the bigger picture,
small things. But the problem is, where do you stop? Where do you stop allowing small things to go wrong? So agencies in general are hectically. I mean, if you utilizing another service provider for a lower end execution, a lot of companies do that. They work with premium agencies for specific reasoning, for strategy, for creative rollout, and then once that's done, then they maybe move to a cheaper agency, or utilize a smaller agency for more executional work, or a social agency that does all the digital services moving forward and all that type of stuff. When that happens, then all the agency wants to know is like, okay, but who's doing this? How are they going to do it? And are they going to ensure they're not going to stuff up the 3 years' work of that we've done?
Hundreds.
So that's exactly why that anal sort of trait is there, because of consistency. So that's definitely, and that's free. Being consistent with your brand, you don't need to pay anyone for that.
You're right.
There's some offset cost that you need to do in the beginning if you're getting an agency to sort of set your business up. But once that's done, and you don't really have budget moving forward to do executional brand development or building, then all the basic thing you fall back on is just be consistent. The way you answer the phone must be the way your introduction on your website works.
Hundreds. It's as easy as saving a Canva template, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No, I was just joking there, because I know essentially, like, as much value as Canva adds, like, it also sometimes causes a lot of different barriers. And that's something we can probably... I'm going to make a note of that.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from.
I'm going to make a note of that, because I want to delve into that a little bit later.
So that what we've actually ironically moved towards the connection part in the middle. And that is the relatability. I don't even think that's a word. Relatability.
We've just made it a word.
If it isn't, relatability of your brand to market, and as well as inward to staff, right? Is how do you make yourself relate to what you're buying?
I agree.
Like, I heard you and Gilbert talking, and it was a very, very awesome podcast, by the way. It was like very insightful.
Thank you.
And I know a lot about it already, so a lot of stuff, it wasn't the first time I'm hearing it, but whoever's listening out there for the first time, the information that you're getting there is like really top quality.
Appreciate it.
But when you guys were referring to, attaching a deal or a saving and putting a value add to a product, that's all talking very, very close, Normandy on the front line.
Yes.
When it comes to sales and delivery of product to market. But how do you get someone to relate to who you are? The product's not doing that. Some companies are importing products from countries that you've never heard of.
Yeah, so that would be your messaging, basically.
Other than Apple, I mean, people are shocked when they hear Apple's produced in China. Well, partly, but
assembled in California.
Yeah. So that's why I said partly, because it is a bit of a catch-22. But those are the type of things that people never think about. But because they've actually extended, what's the word I'm looking for? Ascended past that. They've ascended past what the product is, and they've related to your brand. So that the benefit that a good brand gives you, which is a mix between your internal talk and your external talk, is your connection to the potential customer. And obviously you've got the front end work that needs to be done, and that all needs to be executed very efficiently to get sales and to get people at your front door. But you're not going to get return customers if they can't relate to you. Qualities are the big thing in terms of product, because people are going to buy a shit product once. They won't buy it again.
That's true.
But if they can relate to what you are saying and who you are, and like I would take it someone who follows a cause, right? If I'm selling a product, let's use animals. So I'm a foundation and I sell products that are related to dogs, and the foundation donates and helps abused dogs, etc., etc. That's just a company I've just imagined. I'm going to come to you, and I love animals, and I love the cause that you're supplying, and I'm probably going to buy a dog collar from you, even though I might not even need one because I've got 10 at home already.
Yeah.
That's me relating to who you are, not relating to the product or the price of the product.
It's a topic close to your heart, yeah.
Yeah. So that connection between your company and the potential client is a possible long-lasting relationship.
Would you say that's got to do with your messaging, technically, right? Because,
Yes.
I mean, it's about how you articulate what your brand stands for.
Yeah.
Because this company that you've obviously now imagined could exist, but if they didn't necessarily articulate it clearly enough that this is the cause of, helping stray dogs.
But I don't know
whatever it is.
where you are and what you're doing. Yeah.
Exactly. So from trust perspective, it comes down to consistency. That's what I'm hearing you say. It's very, very important, and that will allow you to build trust. From a connection perspective, it's important that you focus on your messaging. So your messaging, I'm assuming, also needs to be consistent, but at the same time needs to be able to relate to whomever you're talking to.
Yeah.
And they need to understand why you exist, and that needs to trigger like an emotional connection, in order to create that sense of reliability. And then that, again, a word that we came up with. And then from a motivational aspect, you talked about the fact that, that's got to do with your internal communication and your brand internally more so.
Yeah, another point there would be if you've got if your consistency is not there and your messaging's not right, what's going to happen is people are going to take that one experience with your company, and that's going to be set in their mindset. And if they ever do pop onto your website by accident, or you manage to scroll on their timeline for whatever reasoning, then you're just going to keep scrolling because you've already been there, done that. And if you didn't capture that audience with a relatable message or with a deliverable value that actually relates to that potential client, then you've missed that one opportunity. And yes, there's lots of cats or fish in the sea. Sorry, I was like cats in the sea. That would be a good TikTok video.
Absolutely.
Who's got a cat? So basically those three, obviously it breaks down to a whole lot of stuff. Like you said, the connection breaks down to messaging and how you deliver that. But I mean, we've only got the time that we've got today, and we've got to keep moving on because there's some other points that we want to touch on.
No, for sure.
But if clients don't really understand that value of getting those three levels and that funnel that I was talking about, how you talk to people you haven't dealt with, how you talk to people that have bought into you, and then how do you talk to your client, you're never going to build the ethos. You can't build an ethos. You can't decide what your ethos is.
Yeah.
Your ethos gets created by the perception out there, the trust and the loyalty your clients have or your customers have, and the support and trust that your employees have. All of that creates an ethos right in the middle of the funnel.
Yeah.
And you don't think it up. You don't imagine it.
And it takes time.
Just one day, everyone says, "Wow, geez, okay, we fun." Right? But that fun environment was created by decisions that you made in your company. It could have easily been an accounting type of environment where everyone's just behind desks. So yeah, to finish off that point, that's
Yeah, and I think what the important takeaway is that it takes time. Like
Yeah.
brand building takes Coca-Cola 50
Yeah.
years now, I think, almost, if not,
Yeah.
And their logo has changed like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Talk about consistency, and it's more of an evolution
It's
than anything.
strategy. Yeah, it's
versus
not-
Pepsi, who's changed their logo like straight from the bat, like 14 times. Like you, it looks like this, and then it looks completely different. Where I think it was an article I read. So Coca-Cola has been around for 150 years, Pepsi for 120. So let's say for since we've been alive,
Yes.
right? But yet your perception of Pepsi and your perception of Coca-Cola, 2 different things. And the one thing I noticed, they were saying like Pepsi changed their logo like 14 times, and it's all different kind of logos. Like it's not like an evolution. It's like completely changed. And Coca-Cola is like 3 or 4 times, but it's all slow revolution over time.
It's definitely, yeah. Like Nike knew where they were going. They knew where they wanted to end up. So it wasn't an overnight decision to drop the wording of their brand and end up with just the tick.
Yeah.
It was a calculated strategy. One of the clients that we worked on together, for us that was a 5-year project, and we consciously held back on the change. For very specific reasons, because you've got to consider a whole lot of stuff. What do you do with your existing market? If you're completely shifting your value set and your message you're sending out there, what do you do with the people that bought into the previous message?
Yeah.
So those changes that you were referring to have to come very strategically calculated.
100%.
And very strategically timed is probably the right word.
But it's also contextual, before we move on, it's also contextual to your audience size. Because we've seen companies who've been around for a year, they've gotten, the amount of people that you've influenced really in a year is very little. So if you wanted to make changes, you're probably it's probably a good time to make those changes before your brand is 20 years old and 30 years old. So we had someone say, like, how do we transition from this logo to that logo? And I was like, well, how long have you been operational for? No, we've been operational for a year. How many people do you have following you on social media? 500. Meaning that 5 people have been following them,
probably
technically
also
engaging with them.
paid likes. That's probably not true likes.
100%.
Well.
So from our side, I was like, look, guys, it's contextual to your audience. Don't go and spend all this money on really thinking about this. Just make the change and move on, and stay consistent with your new message. If you have been in business for the last 5 to 10 years and you've got an audience size that's obviously much larger, then yes, you have to think these things through, right?
Yeah. It's a much better place to be in.
Yeah.
That's our sweet spot, is when we deal with a company that hasn't really got a basis.
Yeah.
And
'Cause you can do what you want.
Now they stick their hand up and they're like, look, we need to do this right. And then you're like, yes, please, this is what we want. When you get a client on board and they've done this process, so they might have just used the wrong agency who didn't consider the correct way forward. And now they found their way where they now red, and they were supposed to be yellow, and then it's a tough job, and it takes time to do that. Yeah.
No, I can imagine. So from looking at this podcast and what we're trying to achieve, we obviously want to ensure that we add as much value as possible. So I mean, with that, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So so it's going to be very basic questions that I always struggle to really articulate to our clients, and a lot of people that we obviously meet on a daily basis. So from that said, I think standing out from a noisy environment, it's like social media has really like lowered the barrier to entry from a marketing perspective. So your barrier to entry is literally nothing compared to back in the day, traditional marketing, TV, radio, all these things cost a fortune, right? Now social media is so cheap that anybody that's got $100 can advertise. So that means that this environment is super, super noisy. So from a branding perspective, like, what would you suggest would be the best way that brands can really stay, almost like stand out from the noise, essentially, when it comes to, their brand and marketing on these kind of channels?
It's actually quite funny because it's a point that I wanted to touch on. Thinking about leading up to this podcast, and that question really delves into the feud that's been going on. Because I would say the best thing that a company can do is align yourself with someone that understands where the disruption happened, and that's not feuding the modern era, which is online, and the traditional media. Because when you start dealing with someone who's kicking back and saying no, don't, because I get clients to come to me and say, look, we're canning our entire branding and marketing budget and we're just doing digital. Then you like, what? Because they're dealing with someone who's saying no. That's all. You don't have to worry about brand. We're going to just give you leads, and you're going to get sales, and it's just going to happen.
That's all that matters.
But you're going to get one sale, and then that person's going to forget about you, and the next sale is going to go to someone else who catches their attention, unless your brand and your development's happening. So, and then on the other side is you saying, oh, everyone's going digital, and then your current agency saying, no, don't take our budget away. No, social, you see it's fad. It's going to come and go, and and we all know that social is not going anywhere. And online environment for companies is definitely not shifting anytime soon.
Yeah.
So if you've got an agency that's kicking against that, it's going to make your life very hard, because you're either going to get fed up and then with no results, because traditional marketing and branding cannot survive without the modern
100%,
era
they go
online.
hand in hand.
And so I would say the first step is whoever you're working with, and this is not the podcast's not here to try and gain clients or get people on board to work with you, but whoever you are working with, make sure that they understanding where they are playing in their field, because that's your biggest stumbling block. If you're getting advice from someone saying stay digital only, or go digital only, it's the wrong choice. Or stay traditional only, it's the wrong choice, because it needs to be a blend between both.
Yeah, while there's still value in traditional.
Yes,
so that's the thing. Like, obviously, these channels, it's all about the attention. There's still attention. It's just the problem is it's just overpriced. So if you can afford it, then I think it'll add value. Like Absa redid their whole logo, and their logos everywhere. Like, obviously that added value to their strategy, no doubt. But in my opinion, is like there's a lot of smaller companies that we work with that can't afford traditional mediums. So we would always, and I'll be honest, like we would be the people that says go out all digital, because you've only got 5 to 10 grand. Like, you're not going to get much out of a traditional medium.
Yeah.
So if you want to get best bang for buck, you need to put that in context and go, cool, look, let's just take a step back. I have a saying that says all advice is bad advice. Because nobody really truly understands exactly where your brand is, exactly when you're just asking for advice, obviously. But once you've given them all the information, it's about considering all of that data and go, cool, you know what, you only have this much money, we have to consider traditional, digital, we think that, and 9 out of 10 times you're going to be like, cool, you're going to make the biggest impact on social or digital, wherever you want to, Google, whatever it is. But no doubt, like, for example, Apple, they cost per acquisition. So getting someone to walk into their store and making a sale is costing them 10 times less than a new competitor that had to open an electronic store right around the corner, because people know the brand. So the more you focus on brand, the lower you the more you focus on brand and the more you put effort into that, the lower your cost per acquisition will be over time.
Opening day, they probably had a queue around the block.
100%.
Without even really spending anything on other than announcing the opening of the
Elon
store.
Musk is a great example on his new truck. Like, he didn't spend a cent on marketing, but it's the Elon Musk brand and the Tesla brand. Yeah. Like, the brand is connected to him. He's obviously loudmouth when it comes to these things, and he's quite quirky on Twitter, and therefore he's got a huge following. And a huge influence. So when he launched his truck and he explained what it does and why it exists and what it can do, people went nuts, and they're like sold out on pre-orders. And
you almost forget to really question what he's saying. Yeah. Because, I mean, a lot of stuff that Elon Musk, I've been reading quite a lot about him. And funny enough, I had to write a speech for my kid on the future. And I based it on...
Did your kid have to write it, or did you have to write it?
No, well, it's in Afrikaans, it's their redenars, and people pay to have their speeches written.
I'm just joking.
But I mean, he's in grade 6, so they needed a little bit of assistance in terms of topic. So I based it on pretty much flying cars and the concept thereof, and the eye candy with people like Elon Musk and all these guys. It shows you how awesome brand can be, because remember, he is a brand. Yes, he's got companies and they need their individual attention in terms of brand as well, but him himself is a brand. And And people have actually sort of also stopped asking. Like, he put a tweet out saying, "No, our new car's going to have combustion rockets in them, and it's gonna be a flying car." But people don't realize that it's probably going to take like a few $100,000 worth of energy put into that one car to lift it a few mils up.
Yeah.
And then they're only going to know that they're able to do it, and it's going to take another
10
couple of
years.
decades.
Yeah.
To perfect that and to reduce it to something.
That
I mean, I've got
technology.
no doubt that it will probably end up there. But the point is, he just says something, and everyone's like, 5 years' time, we're going to be flying in cars.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
So, you know, in the Mars project, I think we're pretty much edging towards that 10-year timeline that he had, and I don't think but we're so off the topic now.
No,
but
yeah.
anyway.
No, I mean, I love talking about
But
these things.
just to get back on track with what...
Saying about Brand and his brand.
Yes, it was just to ensure that people know that you've got to give attention to both. You
Hundreds.
can't. A good example would be, I'll give you a very good example. One of a potential client that I've got now is a client that's in that sweet spot. They want to sort of revert themselves. They're not completely in a 10-year phase of their brand build.
Yeah.
And they have to pivot now. It's going to be costly. But they do printing, and printing is a very sensitive field at the moment. It's a dying solution for brand, and therefore the industry is taking a huge beating.
Hundreds.
So, funny enough, I work from a bunch of remote coffee shops, which are studios. And I was sitting the one day in the meeting. I think I told you about them, and I just heard a digital company spewing all kinds of crap to the client. And we don't focus solely on digital ourselves, and we probably get partner up with you guys on big projects. But I just knew the crap that was being delivered, sold to this client. And then after the meeting, I just sort of made contact, and I said, "Listen, before you did that whole break thing, so you got to take a step back. I mean, you selling a service to someone in the printing industry which is based on relationships.
Yeah.
No one goes onto Google and says, find me a printer. No, because it's got to do with price, yes, obviously, but prices don't get listed online for printing because printing is very a specific service.
Yeah.
It's like how big, how small, how...
When we need to clarify that, you're saying a printing place more so than the actual printer itself, because thousands of people are looking for a printer, but not.
Sorry, yes,
location.
okay. I'll be more specific. I forget you're in a podcast, and people are like, huh? No, I'm talking about a print house. In other words, that delivers services of, printing of material, that book that you've got there, marketing material, etc. So that's dipped. So it's very rough out there at the moment for printing. But anyway, so they were throwing budget at this digital agency, and they included mailing lists and this and that, and it was all this type of stuff, which I was like, now they're sitting there and they say, but where's these leads that you promised? And then I heard them talking about a bought list of thousands and thousands of names, and I'm like, is one of those names on or emails on that list even going to be relevant?
Yeah, true.
So I was asking all these questions of what I was hearing, and I just approached them afterwards, and then I just realized, you know what, this is a good example of something that won't work well digitally unless you conform your product to work online. Like a company called Printulu does that really well. So they sell all their printing services online, but it's a sort of a one-size-fits-all solution for a lot of stuff.
Yes. I actually had an interview with Printulu.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had an interview with them.
They sort of disrupting the industry in their own right already at the moment. But my point comes down to the fact that if you're still in a traditional form of a print house service, online isn't where you're playing. You actually almost need traditional media there because you are building relationships with someone.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's going to break that relationship is you either break your consistency with service or you break your consistency with quality. And then that person's not going to jump from you onto Google, or you're going to phone your colleague and say, those guys you used for this XYZ. It's all relationship based.
Yeah.
So it's just an example of where, in my opinion, obviously I could be wrong, and there could be ways of making it work online, but just in its traditional sense, I believe that this client wasn't going to work, and they were forced to throw their budget
Yeah, based on what company suggested, and
Yeah, and I mean,
it's a classic example of it probably not paying off for them.
or just rudderless.
Yeah,
There's-
and this
they've got
company is
no direction.
You know what's going to happen is this company is going to go as like, oh, digital doesn't work. We're going to just can it completely.
Yeah, and for now, what I've done with that client is we have pulled back, but we've pulled back for a specific reason to start building their basis.
Yeah.
So that when they do go back to digital or start playing in the digital field again, because I've spoken to you before, because if we ever do get onto that point, I mean, we're going to be partnering up on that because it will fall in a field that we don't actually really play in or I can confidently play in.
Yeah.
So anyway, point coming down to it's just that make sure you're aligning yourself with the right open-mindedness when it comes to service offering, because if in today's era, if you're just pushing one traditional or modern or digital, to be more specific, either or is just going to not really, because you might get sales, but you're not going to get your message delivered to market.
Yeah.
And if you don't have your message or who you are, your value system built, those sales aren't going to really
100%
stick. But anyway,
no, perfect. I think that answers it. Like essentially, it's about doing both if you can afford it, depending on what. When we say traditional, it doesn't mean that it has to be a billboard or has to be a TV. There's just traditional ways of building your brand that is still probably worth doing, depending again contextual to your business, your message, your what you're trying to achieve in the next 5 years, everything like that. It needs to be taken into consideration when you come up with a strategy. Yeah. And 9 out of 10 times, the best strategy will include both, especially when it comes to bigger brands. So no, that makes complete sense. But I just wanted to ask the other thing is that there's no real direct ROI on building your brand. Technically, and this is the problem that we have. Like a lot of small companies want to spend $5,000 and get 20, 30 grand back because it is possible. However, it's difficult to really find that line between building the brand so that the repeat sales can come in on a daily versus spending $5,000, making $10,000, and then the moment you stop spending $5,000, you don't have any sales. So where brand obviously takes over is building that momentum where you spend $5,000, you make $10,000 back, but because you're building brand, tomorrow or the next day or 3 years down the line, you don't spend anything, but you're still making sales because now it's obviously reciprocation on the brand that you've built. So there's no real direct ROI on building a brand, a logo, and a CI.
It's one of the big conundrums that traditional brand strategists have justifying what they're doing for clients, because it's the first budget that gets cut when things go tough because it's not measurable. So it touches base to what Gilbert was saying on the previous podcast. He got very excited about revenue optimization.
Yes,
right.
Yes, that's something we're very passionate about. If you
So I was touching on this when we were chatting before the podcast. Now that. Brands actually got a bit of a role to play there, not in the actual execution of that or the tweaks that you're doing on the sites and making sure that you're trying to get upsells and cross sells through so that you can optimize actual sales, but it's almost the organic method.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Of ensuring repeat business, because once you've bought Apple's story, you're going to purchase. I mean, I just go for my upgrade. I don't even question it. I don't think I've ever looked at a Huawei or a Samsung. I've never even looked at them. It's just upgrade. Apple done.
So can I tell you a funny story? I have had the first iPhone. Actually, not the very first one. The first, I think it was the iPhone, then iPhone 3G. So I got the iPhone 3G, and I think I've had every one ever since. However, there was twice that I moved over to Samsung, and this is nothing against Samsung users.
Ooh, I just actually
starting a war. I know. But what it came down to is I actually had the Samsung S6, and I had the Samsung S9, and I was very happy with both phones for probably 6 months, and I think I always found my way going back to Apple. I sold the phone, I gave it to somebody else, and then I took back my old iPhone because Samsung's marketing is really good. So I'm like, maybe it is. I'm always looking for something new. I'm quite open-minded, and I love tech, obviously. So it'll come to I give my iPhone to my missus, and I upgrade, and I get a Samsung. For the first 6 months, I love it, and I'm just one of those people because Apple resonates with me so much that the brand is so strong, it always pulls me back. Yeah. That's the point I'm trying to make. The brand is so strong that it always pulls me back. And there's people who obviously feel different. There's people who buy Samsung since they've been 16, 18 years old, and they probably try two iPhones and find themselves going back to Samsung. But either or, the brand resonates with them so much that they find themselves going back to the brand that they resonate with the most.
You could almost refer to Sixth Sense, where it's like there's just something that's missing. If you like, when I've ever held
exactly
a different phone in my hand for whatever reason, I cringe. No, I'm joking. It's just there's just something that's just not familiar, and I know obviously the function that it comes grossly only on the functionality, but it's not just that. There's just you almost feel like you're cheating on like a girlfriend. I know it sounds corny, but you feel like it. It's the same as when you do a big shift in anything else in your. It's like you've driven Ford your entire life, and now you want to try a different
Toyota, whatever.
Toyota. Look, I'd drive Toyota any day, but it's just it's in a different price class compared to other vehicles. I mean, your choice, if you can afford a Toyota, your choice is just endless in terms of the other vehicles. But I just that reference is just there to say that you almost that the day you make the decision to shift to a different vehicle make, you almost feel slightly guilty.
Yeah.
And that is, if anyone asks me, where's my real investment with doing brand properly? It would be that. It would be that, how do you get someone to actually feel like they're doing something wrong when they decide not to use your service or not to buy your product?
And there's no practical steps that you can actually take to get that right.
No,
because it's so
it's
many
not
elements, so
measurable.
many
So-
moving parts that goes into creating that experience, right?
Yeah, and it's hard because people who understand it will pay for it without...
Thinking and
I mean, obviously, there's a sense. Look, we got a continuous decline in growth, and something's not working. We better pivot. But then you get people that say, "No, it's not. Didn't work in the first month. I'm canning."
Yeah.
And those are the different viewpoints you got. So people who understand the value of brand or the actual unmeasurable return of investment that it holds, will understand that. Okay, I need to raise alarm bells if I'm not seeing what I want to see. But still trust in, maybe you'll decide to use someone else if you feel like these guys aren't really hitting the mark. But the point is, you're still going to believe in the value that it will add.
Well, that's what it comes down to. Is like I see brand is obviously, okay, we know it's long term, right? And I'm quite sentimental, so I've always wanted to build brand. Like it's something I'm really passionate about. But also because if I, for example, at the age of 50 or 60, had to decide, stepping away from what I'm doing, if you wanted to pass that brand on to somebody else, the more brand equity you have, the higher that acquisition price is going to be.
Yeah.
Because think about Nike for a second. If Nike had to, liquidate themselves essentially, or they got sold on to the highest bidder, like the person, even if they were running at a $1 billion loss every single month, okay, that's, I don't know. I'm not a financial guy, so I don't know exactly how this would work. But if they were running a substantial loss on a monthly basis, and they had to sell the company off to somebody, even though they're running at a loss, the brand will still be sold for a pretty penny, because of the fact that the brand equity that they have, the goodwill that they've created, there's a sense of value in that you can't just obviously, it's not going to just deteriorate. Yeah. So essentially, if you had to sell your business, and you focused on brand for the last 10 to 15 or 20 years, that acquisition price is going to be a lot higher than if you just had to build a company that's just focused on sales, because you're selling something on top of that. You're selling, obviously, the profitability of the business, but at the same time, you're selling the goodwill and the equity that you've built around it.
And that equity actually gains value excluded from the actual value of the actual business.
Yeah.
I think at one stage when my mom was still entrenched in ABSA, I read something, a circular that went around their own internal. And somewhere it was listed that, and I could be completely wrong with the actual figures, but I think their brand, in other words, if you had to let go of, not focus on any of the assets or anything like that, just to brand it, it stretched into the billions. If you had to buy, literally. In other words, I've got my own banking service, almost like what Barclays did.
Yes.
Really. Barclays bought all the businesses and said, we're cladding. So Barclays would have that value, and you would have to, okay, this was the other way around, so that actually doesn't really make that much sense. But my point is, if you actually had to sell it so that someone else could take that brand and apply it to their own assets.
Environment, whatever. Yeah.
Environment, it would cost into, I think it was, and this was years ago, it was like a good 10 odd years ago that it was already stretched to there.
That's crazy, man.
I'd like to touch back on ABSA's campaign, by the way, because I hope I don't offend anyone I really know. But for me, there was a classic example of how using a big, because there's a perception out there that using a big agency, paying premium price for farting left and sneezing right in the process, and being charged for that at a big agency is the way to go because you'll always get results. For me, the ABSA relaunch campaign was a complete dud. And that's just my opinion.
Why do you think that?
Can you explain to me what the message is? I know you're not necessarily ABSA.
No, I'm with F&B.
With F&B, right? So you've obviously made decisions throughout your
life. I was with ABSA, actually. I moved over to F&B in 2012, 13.
I was also at ABSA, but it's got nothing to do with their current campaign, right? So no one can really give you an exact answer of what are they actually trying to say.
I don't know. Like, to be honest, if I look at F&B, the reason I like it is because it speaks to my millennial side around innovation and tech, and I'm a techie kind of person, so I can do everything on my phone. Yeah. Maybe ABSA has got the same services. Maybe NetBank. I mean, I think my brother-in-law actually works at NetBank. I don't think he definitely is working at NetBank. If you have to ask me what his role is, I probably won't be able to tell you. But he was explaining to me that, the NetBank has got just as innovation happening on their side. The innovation is just as great, and the technology is amazing, and the offering is just as great. But I feel, the brand, again, the brand that resonates with me is the brand that I'm going to back. Yeah. And F&B just found a way to resonate with me. I understand what they're trying to say. Like, I'm not a smart, intelligent guy, right? So your marketing needs to be layman's. And I think this is what people don't understand, is that they're trying to sometimes sound sophisticated because they think premium has to be equivalent to sophistication. And to an extent, yes, but not necessarily when it comes to the message that you're trying to, the actual words, right? So not on that granular level. It doesn't have to be like that. And I think, not that any of the other banks are doing that, but I'm just thinking, like, the way F&B speaks to me is, I understand it. Do you get money back for groceries every month? I'm like, no, I don't. I want to go to F&B. Do you get money back for gas? No, I don't. I want to go to F&B. So I think that's just their messaging that resonates and kind of like with me, and it makes sense.
So to elaborate a bit with why I think ABSA specifically had a bit of a wobble in terms of their relaunch specifically, because I mean, I'm not the market. Their market has clearly shifted to a lower income group, which they targeted quite aggressively. You can see it with where advertising happened. You can see they focused on inner city. They try to create this Mzansi culture rebirth. And so I'm not the market. A lot of people revert to say, but you don't get it because you're not the market. But I fall back onto the fact that this is what I do. So I feel I'm able to look at a messaging, and even though it's not meant for me, I can analyze it enough to say, whoa, this is not really making sense. I don't believe it's going to have the effect that people were aiming for. And I just didn't really, and I followed it because I really loved the brand revert that ABSA did. From where they were to where they are, because it definitely brought them on the same level as F&B. But to this day, I can't really explain to you what the messaging drive in its essence was. I can tell you what billboards said and what ads said and what street polls said, because they spent a crap load of money.
Can I ask you a question? Do you remember Steve from F&B?
Yeah, I remember Steve.
Do you remember the radio ads? Steve?
Yeah.
Hey Steve. It was a Hey Steve or
it
something.
Was something like
Steve
that,
or
but
someone.
I remember that. It's coming back to me now.
But now, that is what marketing is all about, right? Mom remembered now, Rose. Like, we're talking about what brand really is. Like, it's stuff that you remember, stuff that resonates with you, and it's stuff that you go, hey, cool. Yes, MBS. Like, I'm talking about, like, way back, right? Like, when I was, like, 6, 7, 8 years old. And So from my side, I think that's what brand is all about. And I'm thinking about F&B. If you had to ask me, ABSA, what they've done, if something that you remember or resonate with me, look, I'm not someone that looks for, banking ads. But where I drive, I'm conscious of F&B.
Yeah, but it's the brown car effect.
Apps's rebrand definitely got my attention, and I actually like it. Like, I think it's cool. I like the lowercase. It's casual. It's chill. Like, I like the there's a bit more structure to it. I like it.
They definitely captured the modern market.
Yeah, but I don't know what your message is. And I think with F&B, I understand what your message is. You're trying to save me money. Whether they get it, whether they actually do it or not, like other banks will say no, but they don't actually save you money because this or that. I don't know. I'm not into the banking sector as much as there's a lot of other people listening. But from my side, I'm like, I don't know if it's true or not, guys. All I know is that's what I understand, and therefore I'm opening my wallet to them because I understand what they're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, banking fees in general are so hidden sometimes. You don't realize you're actually paying whatever. But
I still don't know what I'm paying every month. Like, I just get a message from my accountant, and then I fall over, and then I don't know why. But nonetheless, like, it comes down to the brand resonates with me, and therefore I support them. And again, I've never had a bad experience with F&B since I actually been with them. Like, they've been amazing. Brand experience, right? Yeah. That's what we just talked about.
One last example, because I don't know what our time's doing now, but
we can sit here all day.
I'm sure, yeah. How's your data out there? I'm 37, turning 38 this year, so I'm sort of hitting the maturity quite aggressively at the moment. But
not far behind you.
We actually on a WhatsApp group, a friend's WhatsApp group, we sort of somehow came across all these old nostalgic ads. And we were hitting them across WhatsApp to each other, and it was like, "Oh, you remember?" And it was like, "Not inside, it's on top."
Oh yes,
Cremora ad, and it was the clown that balances on the big ballpoint pens. And
can't remember that. Who was that?
It was old school ad. I think it was even old for me when I saw it back then. And it was just this clown, circus environment, and this clown sort of comes up and he asks the audience for pens, and they give he's got a pen, and they ask for a pen, and the pen that he gets given isn't a Bic. And then he does this thing where he goes onto a platform and he actually, with the open pen, does a handstand and stands with full body weight on it. And then afterwards he jumps down, and then the kid gives him a piece of paper, and he does his autograph in the pen, and it still works.
Yeah.
Very nostalgic ad. People will go nuts about it when they see it. But one thing that really struck me was when we posted or I posted it more specifically, was the VW ad. I don't know if you remember do you remember the time of our lives?
No.
That ad where it goes from like the 60s. And you got like these hippies, and they.
If I see it, I'll probably remember it.
I think the guy gets the folksy originally from his dad, and then he's like this young guy that's just cruising around in Woodstock, and then he gets this girl.
Yes,
but it's South African based though, but very Woodstocky, and then. Gets jiggy in the backseat of his folksy, and then his wife's pregnant, and then the kid gets born, and so everything evolves, and they evolve, and they become modern parents, and they got this young teenager. He then eventually, in the end of the ad, gets to a driving age, and his dad opens the garage, and he's now driving a Jetta,
an
updated vehicle.
Yes.
But then he opens the garage, and the first car that he gives to his kid is the Folksy.
I'm actually getting goosebumps right now. Like, no, look at that. I'm not lying.
It's definitely like
that's actually pretty cool.
And that's the VW history.
Yeah.
It almost took an ad, and they sort of went through this history and showed the modernization of their vehicles at that time, and went back and did homage to the Folksy.
Yeah.
When at its prime. And it was just, everyone was like, "Oh my word, I remember this. This is great." And that's good brand.
I can watch the ads all day long. Stuff like that. It's really cool. Look, before we go, last thing, right? Small business owners, like, if you have to focus on, this is our question to you, by the way. No, I'm not speaking to the audience. My question is, if you're a small business owner and you have a cash trap budget, like, we need to have empathy that not every single person has probably the budget to spend money on a new website, new logo, rebrand. And yes, you can do it in bits and pieces, but the main question is, where do you start? What do you think is the most important thing? Like, if you had limited budget and you want to start focusing on brand today, you listened to this podcast, you heard what we had to say, and you're in a position where you're like, you know what, I'm going to start focusing on my brand. Considering that this specific person doesn't have a lot of money for their brand in order to spend on their marketing, all that kind of stuff, because there's probably a 1 or 2 person show, what do you do? Like, what would be the next steps?
Well, what I always try and tell clients, because there's no real correct answer, because depending on if you want to start an e-commerce store, you got to build your store. It's going to cost a pretty penny. There are obviously options if you can teach yourself how to do it. There's cheaper ways of doing it, but it just depends. Like if you selling a good, in a store, and you've got that relationship, you almost don't need the brand straight away because it's based on relationship.
True.
You're putting a product on. But there's smaller things that result. What do you put on the label of the product? How's your packaging and all that type of stuff? So I'm just sort of trying to list the differentiation that there is.
Yeah, you
or
could be anywhere. I
Or it's a
understand
service, like the printing service, for example. That's going to say, please don't spend money at the moment on digital because that's not where you're building your client base. You're building your client base in relationship, in meeting rooms. So yes, you could get a phone call or two from digital, but spend enough so that your brand is consistent and elegant online, but put money towards where you need it. So as corny and as dated as a sales folder sounds, if you need to get into meeting rooms and leave a leave behind, then that could be where you need to spend your money. I'm not saying it is. I'm just trying to give the differentiation that there is.
No, I get it.
So with that said, get a clear goal. Because and this is where agencies and to all the clients out there or potential clients out there, I would say that this is the important of the decision that you make to who you work with. If you're working with someone that is sales driven on their side and they don't have a passion or a value that they see in your brand, because I've always got the opinion is if I make you successful, I'm going to be successful.
Yeah, true.
If I keep growing you, you're going to give more budget to me. And that's pretty much how strategy works in our environment.
Yes.
So I'm passionate about your brand and I want, and it's a record for me. So if you're dealing with people that don't have that in mind and it's just about another invoice, and when you really need them, the door's closed. And sometimes that's how big agencies work. So it's better finding a smaller agency that then, if you don't have budget, find a smaller agency, which is a given, obviously, that is passionate about what you're doing. So that when you're getting advice, you're getting authentic advice.
Yes.
Because it's something that I've always appreciated about you. You'll tell a client, I can't really work with you, and there's no real tension or anything like that. It's just what you want and what we can give don't match.
Yeah, 100%. And I believe in that. You need to be that transparent with someone.
So the first thing I would do is find the right partner to walk the journey with. Because if you find the right partner, I mean, I've got a lot of clients where we waive a huge amount of our fees. Because obviously, if you're doing Tanstini's tuck shop down in the road, you're not going to say, well, let's develop you a brand that can compare to APSA.
Yeah.
When all you're going to need is your name on the top of a tuck shop and maybe a sticker or two but you do need services every now and then.
Hundreds.
Okay, so it's a very random example. But
I get it.
It's if you're working with the wrong people, you're going to go down the wrong road. When it comes to actual budget, find a set of goals, and when you get that right advice that I was just talking about now, you can come up with a set of goals with your brand. Don't put brand in the background, because that's the quickest way you become dated.
Yes.
Is if you then say, you know what, from now on we're just going to work on product development and sales, and we're not going to do anything on brand. And you find yourself 10 years down the line with industry where you used to rely on relationships. Now everything's online. Your industry's disrupted. And now when you're doing tenders, you can't compete because what's being put on a desk is not a Word document. It's a full-on proposal pack that's been developed with brand ethos screaming at the potential whoever approves tenders. Whereas you used to be the best in your industry, and that's what you rode on. Now you don't have a brand. And that's what happens to people when they're like, oh, we don't need brand. So come up with a good set goal of how you want to
those.
Do micro evolutions to your brand. So you don't need to. I would allocate a small. If you can only afford $2,000 a month, to spend on brand. So in other words, you get someone who's willing to work with you, even if it's a single designer or someone with just a little bit of knowledge, just to keep updating your brand, even if it's one thing a month.
Making sure it's consistent, maybe updating your site. I mean, I think that's where we are. Like, I looked at our site this morning, because not necessarily on purpose, because we're doing this podcast today. I was on the site, and because we were doing this podcast, I thought about brand. I was like, oh, but you know what? I think, over time, this website has changed so much that it's actually not really exactly what I envisioned the day we launched our new logo or whatever, or new look and feel and everything like that. So I was like, you got the look and feel of what we had in mind, but now slowly, because it's the changes have been so incremental, we've actually moved away from what we tried to achieve 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it's stuff that can obviously be fixed. So I think what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like find out what your goals are, re-engineer your goals, find someone that's affordable, that you can trust, that you can work with, and then go, cool, you know what? These are my goals. How do we re-engineer the practical steps that needs to happen? And how can we ensure that we focus on it every single month to take one step closer to those goals? So if you don't have a site, if building a site is something that you need to do, because obviously that's where people come over and learn more about you, then that's something you need to focus on. If you already have a site, but like ours now, maybe it's not ideally what you set out 2 years ago, and you realize that you need to take a step back and just ask yourself, where do you want to go with this brand or website? Then have that exact person, try and improve the messaging on your website. And same with everything else. Like that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah. And just don't stop working on your brand, and don't stop thinking about your brand, because no one ever comes up with that light bulb moment if they stop thinking about who they are, where they're moving.
You have to be in love with your brand.
Yes, and those bright spark moments of being ahead of the disruption come when you're working on your brand. When those ideas pop up, yes, obviously there's industrial bright sparks of new innovations or stuff that if you're quick enough, you could build a whole nother other business just on an idea. But I'm talking about your business, your core business now, version 8 designer. If I don't, okay, it's tricky. We like a mechanic's car.
Yeah.
You like, ironically, you always seem to be let down because your own car's not working as what you, because we always working on someone else's brand, and that's one of the negatives that I'm actually trying to advise against. So make sure you always think, even if you're doing stuff yourself, there's nothing wrong with teaching yourself how to do. That's how I did. It's.
Do you know how I started Fitness 101? I learned how to do website design, Joomla, WordPress, basics. Then I was like, hey, I can move stuff around on the site, but I can't make my site look pretty. So then I realized I need to understand Photoshop. So actually it was Fireworks. Like, I don't think Fireworks even exists anymore.
No, definitely.
So I was using Fireworks to move banners around. I was like, hey, I can, and then I started learning Photoshop. Then I started, getting into, well, now I need traffic. So now I learned that I had to teach myself how to do Facebook ads, how to do Google ads. So essentially, when I launched this business 2 years ago, we literally started in my son's bedroom. By the grace of God, we've grown quite nicely over the last 2 years. It was literally because of the fact that I could sell the service at a profitable rate because I knew how to do everything.
Yeah.
So I understood marketing because it's something I've always been passionate about. I understood the internet because it's something I've been doing for 5 to 6 years. And then I was like, but hold on, I've got the skill sets to build my own site, to do my own creatives, to do everything else. So it didn't cost me anything to start the business. And it was very profitable for me to get clients because I was the one servicing them. But nonetheless, I hear what you're saying. It's important to, as a small business owner, to maybe sometimes, look at these things and ask yourself, what are you passionate about? And maybe teach yourself, a little bit about brand, a little bit about Photoshop, a little bit about this or whatever it is.
Yeah, people in our position could argue, no, don't do it yourself. Pay us to do it. But ironically, once people actually start realizing the value, when we first started interacting, but firsthand, you learned the value of actually making sure that your design work, your brand execution is correct. And it was easy for you to take the step and say, okay, you know what, I'm rather going to pay these guys to do it because I now understand the value and I actually also have an idea of the effort that goes into it. So indirectly, if you can't afford it, do it because you're going to start realizing the benefit that you're going to get if you do end up with
100%.
Budget and actually decide to actually get things done professionally. because when that value is realized, then the only way forward is onward.
So you know what the funny thing is? I looked at, this is now something maybe that's not necessarily in your field, but Google Search Console can show you how often people are looking for your brand online.
Yeah.
And so I always use it because I'm, romantic. I love the idea of building brand.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking at how often people are looking for version 8, or V8 Media. This is an exact example. Like, we were V8 Media, but now we version 8. Like, we had a whole transition. Like, we didn't have a big enough audience, so we just went in straight into version 8. But my mind is sometimes still saying V8 Media, whatever it is, even though this is our own internal thing that we need to sort out, right?
Yeah.
But this is a classic example. But from our side, as a business owner, you can actually see if your brand building tactics or strategies are actually paying off. Because the stronger you're building your brand, the more people will move over to Google and search for it. Because that's what people, I think there was a stat the other day that came out, like 65% of people jump onto Google. That's where they start their buying journey.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn more about a company, the first thing you do is you Google them and try and find a site or something, more information about them. So I can actually see how many people are searching for V8 Media or version 8 or whatever it is. And I can see those numbers are increasing on a monthly basis, which means that our brand building efforts are slowly paying off because people are seeing us and they want to learn more about us. And they don't go digital marketing agency and then see us. They actually type in V8 Media. Yeah. Who is V8 Media?
I always, a funny thing is, when I'm communicating with clients on email, obviously when you build a relationship, then I become Herc.
Yes.
Hercules or Herc, and people deal with me on a personal basis. But when someone refers to my company or my business, I almost feel like I had a success. You know, or a good example was the other day when a client of ours was referring the email to someone else that needed to work with us in terms of getting a project done. And it wasn't, listen, just speak to Hercules, he'll do, because that's now just relying on your relationship.
Yeah.
And if that relationship breaks, technically you could lose that client,
yes,
right? But in all theory. But in the email, it was like, no, we work with designer and you're going to need to just deal with them with XYZ and then we can get things sorted. And I almost felt that was a little bit of a success for me because I do want to build relationships with my clients because that gives longevity, and the bigger the relationship, the in general, you'd say the odds of losing the client becomes less.
Yeah, hundreds.
But when they actually start seeing you as a entity and not just this personal connection, you're doing something right, and your brand becomes now your brand's moving. And I mean, we use Google, so even the references in my emails, I don't know how Outlook works, in terms of that type of picking up on key things. But I mean, I'm sure Google's got some algorithms that's picking up on back and forth.
Gmail,
Yeah, so we use basically Gmail online because we're such a small group. But so just to touch on that point, because you want to see people using the word version 8, because then you're doing your job in terms of brand. The same thing on my side. But if that's the type of messaging you want to get across to the clients out there or potential clients out there, and just don't stop thinking about your brand. If you can't do anything this month, don't spend money. It's fine because you need to pull back a little, but know that as soon as this budget does come in, you need to move forward. Just like you moving forward in your business, your brand needs to keep. Else, your brand's going to be back there.
I like that.
Your business is going to be here, and there's going to be that middle part, that connection part that's between the inside talk and the outside talk. It's going to be missing because there's no connection to who you are and what your business has become without a rudder, right?
Dude.
Look,
thanks for coming through today. And I think essentially it was a super insightful talk. I mean, some people might find it boring, but I think if you're in the marketing space, then hopefully there was some value. I really enjoyed it. I hope you
Yeah.
enjoyed it yourself.
No, I do. You know me personally. I'll talk all day. So
Sweet, man. No, look,
but,
I want to thank you for coming through. I want to thank
yeah.
you for your time and sharing some insights with us. It really means a lot. And all the best for you, your wife, the business, and everything.
Yeah,
We'll
thanks.
touch base soon. And for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. And for those of you listening, thanks for tuning in. From our side, we'll be back next week with another episode. And all the best and have a good one.
Cool. Thanks. Next time.
Cheers, eh?